When an operator presses help while in a batch of work, he is presented with a menu of choices. This menu is the same regardless of which mode the operator has been in. In this case, we're in resume mode. We're in our dup1 batch under the subdirectory student. I'll press the help key and let's look at the data entry help list. We're going to cover the first 7 items in this particular lesson. One of the first 2 items, terminate or interrupt, are used if the operator is exiting the batch. If he chooses terminate, Unibase sets the batch status to terminate, and if a file edit is attached to the batch, runs that program. If he chooses interrupt, Unibase sets the batch status to interrupt and doesn't run the file edit. A file edit is a program that looks at all the records in a batch, not just a particular field. Usually this program is written to look for batch-wide errors that need to be corrected. The error messages are recorded in a file that is stored in the file log subdirectory under the Unibase root directory. The file log has the same name as the batch. Let's terminate this batch and resume a different one so we can see what a file log looks like. I'll resume the file KC edsplays. We're interested in the file log associated with it, so I'm not going to comment on the data in the batch. I'll press help. I'm going to choose item C, display file log. And this is the information that's in this particular file log. Since the operator didn't put any labels on the items, we're not quite sure what we're looking at. We can guess the second item is the time, but we don't know what the first item is. It doesn't matter. My whole point here was to show you what item C on the data entry help list does. I'll press help to exit and we'll terminate the batch. It also tells us that there is a file log present, and we can choose whether or not to display it at this point. Since we've already seen it, I'm going to choose no, and we'll get out of our statistics. Now we'll do examine the file surv1. This is a batch that had lots of record formats, if you can remember it from our earlier lessons. If we press help and choose the item D, display file info, we can see how many formats. 12 of them. There's other information in this file. We see the file was keyed using the standard job named survey. It was first created on Valentine's Day and last updated on March the 3rd. We also see that each format links to the next one. This is pretty typical in a survey, in that the last format, 12, links back to format 1. Also, we don't have a field edit or a file edit in this batch. What about these items about largest rec format mem, rec format, page size? These pieces of information might be useful in some extreme cases, but as long as the total memory needed for your record formats is less than the page size, you don't have to worry. So we'll release and terminate. I'm going to resume a file named batchbell/test. Because it actually used an accumulator in this particular job. When we press help and choose item E, which is display accumulators, we see the values in all 32 of the accumulators that Unibase provides. Accumulators are merely storage areas where a programmer can save numbers. A number can be added to or subtracted from an accumulator. This job at least used accumulator 1 because it has a value of 50,000 in it. All the other accumulators have a value of 0. Well, that was a lot of nothing, so we'll release out of it. Now, this next item, item F. Sometimes an operator has a problem with the field. The all too human tendency is to ask the person sitting next to you about it. Before you know it, 4 or 5 keyers are trying to decide if a character is an S or a 5, or a Z or a 2. To eliminate these discussions, or at least to end them more quickly, operators should mark the field in some fashion. Unibase does this from the help list when an operator chooses item F. I'll do that now. An error flag, which looks like a pound sign or a number sign, but is really a hex 01, is placed at the position the operator was at when he pressed the help key. And the operator is positioned at the next character to be keyed, in this case the first character of the last name. Presumably the problem will be resolved by someone whose job it is to do so. Our last item is return to data. Does it need an explanation? I don't think so, unless you're having a blonde day. So let's return to data now. All of those menu options can be accessed by using the record key and pressing the same letter. Remember when we were in Verify and tried to display the contents of the record by using record D for record display? If I press the record key, function key 3, hit the letter D, we get display file information, which is item D on that menu. So now you see why we had to use something else to display the contents of a record in Verify mode. That was the record W. Using the record key is a little faster than the help key because you avoid displaying the menu. But there's one minor difference. Trying to do return to data, which would be record G, doesn't make sense when you're already looking at the data. Instead, this key combination also flags an error, but instead of placing you at the next character, it takes you to the next field. I'm going to do record F first, which is function key 3, followed by the letter F, and you see that we're at character 2 of the last name field. Instead, I'll do record G, function key 3, the letter G. It also puts in the error flag, but this time takes us out of the field and positions us at the third field of this record. So that's a little faster than having to release your way out of the field. An operator can also suspend the clock while in a batch with the record S key combination. If I press function key 3 followed by the letter S, we get data entry suspended in the upper left-hand corner. An operator might use this key combination rather than interrupting the batch when he goes on break and then having to resume it when he returns, particularly if the batch name is pretty long. And pressing any key combination gets rid of the suspension and the operator is back where he left off. Now let's press help and terminate this batch, and let's see what that did to our time. But before we do that, remember accumulator 1 had an amount in it, and one of the messages we get is that the accumulators are out of balance, and accumulator 1 has 50,000 in it. When we press release to proceed, we get our session operator statistics. Let's look at the time in the top line here. Our start time, 14, 13, 18. Our finish time, 14, 19, 20. If you're real good at math, that means that we were in this batch for 6 minutes and 2 seconds. But notice that our total keying time is only 4 minutes and 23 seconds. Our help time, 53 seconds, is the time that we spent whenever we had the help key pressed and we're looking at the data entry help list. Our suspended time was when we pressed the record S combination, and if you add up the keying time, the help time, and the suspended time, it will add up to the 6 minutes and 2 seconds that is the difference between the start time and the finish time. The rest of the items on the Data Entry Help menu will be covered in the next lesson.